That was close. What's going on, guys? Josh from SoccerReviewsForYou.com, and welcome to episode 2 of 5 Random Boots. From my collection of over 1,000 pairs of boots, I've pulled out 5 random ones that we're going to take a closer look at. So hopefully you'll see something that you've never seen before and learn a few things that you didn't know either. If you guys do end up enjoying the video and want to see this continue on the channel as a series, don't forget to support this video with a like. And if you're new here watching for the first time, don't forget to hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification for daily videos on all the latest and greatest soccer gear. Also, if you missed episode 1 of this series and perhaps want to check it out, it'll be the first link in the description. With all of that said, let's get right into it. The Nike Air Zoom T92. This is the second ever Nike T90 model that came out way back in 2002, which, believe it or not, because these don't really look that dated to me, was 16 years ago. So it's been quite some time since these were a thing. Now, this is a shoe that in particular is very special to me because it's the first shoe looking back growing up that I really recognized as being something special. For the first several years of playing this game, I pretty much just wore whatever boots my parents provided for me. Didn't really care what brand they were, didn't really care how they looked, didn't even really care too much about how they felt. As long as they weren't uncomfortable, it's not something I was concerning myself with. But I remember at 9 years old going to a sports store and seeing these on the shelf, not in this color, but in a black and white colorway, and I thought that they were absolutely gorgeous. It's something that I really liked the look of. I love the off-center lacing system, which, believe it or not, at that time was kind of revolutionary. Not many shoes had lacing systems that weren't straight down the middle, so this was kind of very unique in that regard. I love the way it looked, and I remember seeing the studs on this shoe and thought they looked like teeth. It's so aggressive looking, and honestly, this Nike Intertract firm ground stud pattern, in my opinion at least, is one of the best ones that Nike has ever produced. Now, what's also interesting about this shoe is the synthetic upper. It's listed as KNG 100, but this is technically the very first KangaLite upper. I guess technically it would have been the one that we got on the original T90, but it's listed as KNG 100 in most tech specs. But if you look at the original tags that I have with the shoes, you can see it does actually say KangaLite, something that we still see today from Nike. Obviously, it's changed quite a bit over the years, but you can see some of the benefits that they listed with KangaLite at that time, which are pretty much the same things that they recommend now, or the reasons why they say KangaLite is so good, and that it's supposed to mimic the feel of natural leather while still maintaining the benefits of a synthetic, in that it'll be more lightweight, it's not gonna stretch, it's gonna dry more quickly, it doesn't require any maintenance. And I'll be honest, this does not really feel like true kangaroo leather, and I believe they did actually make this shoe in a true kangaroo leather variation as well. Obviously, it has all the stitching like a leather shoe would normally have. So in that regard, the design of the shoe didn't necessarily change all that much, being that it was synthetic as opposed to leather. But the off-center lacing system, the big fold-over tongue, which I really like the look of, you can see that this does also have the Zoom Air branding, and basically there are Zoom units in the base of the sole plate for extra cushioning, something that was a pretty common thing on Nike T90 models up until the Laser 1. That was the last one to feature Zoom Air, which it only had it in the heel. And in all honesty, I thought it was a cool concept, but I don't think it's something that Nike is probably ever going to bring back in their soccer cleat division. Again, the firm ground stud pattern, this Intertract layout, I absolutely love it. It's not too far off from what the T90 model pretty much had throughout their entire lifespan. Very aggressive, very stable as well. I just really like the way it looks in general. And you can see this boot in particular is, of course, 16 years old. They're brand new condition, but because they're so old, the materials just break down over time. So you can see the lining material, at least the surface of the lining, basically the silver bits are kind of flaking off over time, which is a bit of a shame, but that's just gonna happen with age. You can even see the sole plate used to be translucent, but there's some yellowing happening. Pretty unavoidable. Once they get older, they're going to look a little bit aged, but overall, big fan of the T92. The Reebok SPRINTFIT LITE Pro. Now, these came out back in 2008, and this technically was the second generation of the Reebok SPRINTFIT series, of which I believe there was only 2, possibly 3. It never really caught on, but Reebok really did their best to try to make this line a success by stealing away Thierry Henry from Nike. Now, back in 2007, when Thierry Henry made his switch from Arsenal to Barcelona, at that time, Thierry Henry was considered to be one of the best players in the world, one of my personal favorite players of all time, who was a Nike endorsed athlete wearing the Nike Mercurial Vapor 3. When he switched from Arsenal to Barcelona, he also made a brand switch in terms of endorsement deals, switching from Nike to what was a fairly unknown brand and still is a fairly unknown brand in the soccer world, Reebok. At least they weren't well known for their boots. And to have Thierry Henry wearing Reeboks was a very big deal. So what they did is Reebok essentially tried to copy the concept and general styling of the very popular Nike Mercurial Vapor series. At that time, it was the Vapor 3. When these came out, they would have been competing against the Vapor 4. So Thierry Henry, who was the favorite player of a lot of kids growing up, was basically there to convince kids to buy Reeboks over Nikes. Unfortunately for Reebok, it was not overly successful. I myself, a huge Thierry Henry fan, I saw these, I always thought they looked cool. I never thought that this was a bad looking shoe. I still think it's actually a pretty cool looking boot, but I still bought Nike Mercurials over buying Reeboks. I just didn't want to take the plunge. I didn't want to take the chance. And honestly, it was probably the right call because these, when compared to the Vapor 3 and Vapor 4, which arguably are not very comfortable shoes, at least I don't think they are, this is definitely not to the same quality standards, although it does feature a Teijin synthetic upper. A lot of people don't know this as well, but Teijin synthetic, which was basically a mainstay for the Nike Mercurial Vapor line, introduced on the Vapor 3 and pretty much continued all the way up until the Vapor 11, it's not a Nike synthetic. These also featured Teijin synthetic, although this is definitely a lot thicker and just not nearly as good quality as the Teijin synthetic found on the Vapor 3 and Vapor 4 that these would have been competing against. Central lacing system, you can see it does even have a split sole design that would have been featured on the Vapor 3 and Vapor 4 at the time as well. A kind of unusual bladed stud pattern where the blades themselves almost aren't disconnected from each other. You almost have these like long blades along the edges of the sole plate itself, which is kind of unusual. And then of course there's the weight aspect. If this is going to be a speed boot competing against the Mercurial, you want it to be very light. The Vapor 3 and Vapor 4 in a size 9 US would weigh in at around 8 ounces or so. These in a size 9 US weigh in at 9.5 ounces. So they weigh quite a bit more. I'm sure Thierry Henry had his own different variation of the shoe that was completely custom, probably a lot better than these. But in terms of what was available to the public, this was it. And they really never caught on for reasons that I think are fairly understandable. The MIZUNO Wave IGNITUS 1. Now these came out back in 2010, 8 years ago, and what's cool about these out of my entire collection is most of my collection was kind of purchased or at least acquired after the whole soccer reviews for you thing kind of took off. It's not something that I was doing actively until I started this channel, but when I was 17 years old and these first came out, I just started working at a soccer store. It was my first job, and basically the first several paychecks that I made all went towards buying the boots that I could never afford. So the MIZUNO Wave IGNITUS was at the top of my list. I was a huge fan of the Nike T90 series and the Predator series from Adidas, and this MIZUNO Wave IGNITUS was kind of Mizuno's answer to those particular shoes. And I had never tried a Mizuno product. I always wanted to. I heard such good things about them, and I'm glad that I tried these out. Looking back at the entire Wave IGNITUS line, which I've worn every single pair, it's now discontinued unfortunately. The Rebula is great. I personally wish they would have continued with the Wave IGNITUS though. This was probably the best one. Full kangaroo leather upper, got all these striking elements that aren't particularly grippy, but they definitely offer a very unique sensation when it comes to striking the ball. And then of course the Mukaiten panel, which amongst boot enthusiasts at that time, this was a really big deal. This was kind of the no spin element for hitting a knuckleball more efficiently. Does it actually work? In my opinion, not really. If you want to hit a knuckleball, proper technique is still required, but it was still something very, very cool. The slightly off-centered lacing system, the quality, the comfort of the shoe, probably one of the most comfortable shoes that I've ever worn. I love the big external plastic heel counter, and the stud pattern sole plate as a whole was just really, really unique. This is such a cool shoe. I love the way they look, especially in this yellow and black colorway. And it's one of those shoes that over the years, I sold a lot of the boots at the very start of this channel to kind of fund bringing in new products. And it's unfortunate because I had some really cool stuff that I sold away, but this is one of those shoes that I did not want to sell because I really, really like them, and I continued to wear them probably for the next 2 or 3 years after I originally purchased them at 17 years old. And honestly, now that I have them out again, I'm probably gonna start wearing them at least once or twice just to kind of reminisce on how much I really do love these. The 2014 Adidas Predator Instinct, also known as the last Predator before Adidas killed it and then recently brought it back, with a shoe that honestly isn't very Predator-like. And a lot of people would argue that this isn't really classic Predator either, in that it doesn't have a leather upper and it doesn't have the fold-over flap tongue. This was kind of the third evolution of what was originally launched as the Lethal Zone series. We had the Pred LZ1, Pred LZ2, and that turned into the Predator Instinct, which honestly featured pretty much all the same elements with the hybrid touch upper, the rubber striking elements scattered throughout pretty much the entirety of the foot, at least the parts of the foot that would be making contact with the ball when shooting. They also implemented this kind of gel pad here on the medial side for control, which honestly not a super noticeable element. And it also incorporated the control frame, which we now see back again on the Predator series, even though it's a little bit different, arguably better than this particular sole plate was. But what I really like about this particular shoe, this being the very first one, the Battle Pack colorway that launched during the 2014 World Cup, I love the way this looks. I think it's a very cool looking shoe. This is one of those shoes that offers one of the most unique experiences in regards to striking the ball, at least because of these rubberized striking elements that run throughout the entire upper. There's so much extra grip that doesn't necessarily allow you to swerve the ball more easily, but it allows you to generate spin more easily. So without proper technique, these are not going to make you shoot like Beckham or anything like that. But with proper technique, unlike any other shoe that I've ever worn, that extra grip really does make a big difference in regards to how easily you can manipulate the ball in terms of how much spin and what kind of direction you're putting on it just because of that extra grip. There's so much extra grip that it actually does take some getting used to. I remember when I first tried out the Predator Instinct, it's one of those shoes that I wasn't overly crazy about. I found myself, because when I dribble, I tend to drag the ball across my foot. Because of the rubber elements, you can't really do that as efficiently. It kind of just sticks and you end up tripping over the ball. But once I got used to that sensation, I absolutely fell in love with the Predator Instinct. I don't love this sole plate. I don't love this stud pattern, even though it's pretty much still the same stud pattern that we see on all the Adidas models today. And the Battle Pack one was a little bit different in that it didn't incorporate that reverse Velcro heel liner at the very base, which honestly was a little bit better than this initial colorway. But overall, I love the look of the shoe. I love the experience of wearing them. And the Predator Instinct, while it's not a true classic Predator, I really do hope that Adidas brings back something like this at some point in time under the return of the Predator, because rubber elements, in my opinion, is what the Predator series is all about. So to not have them on the latest one, to me, that's a bit of a shame. The Puma King Finale. Now these came out 8 years ago in 2010, and in my honest opinion, since this particular boot, Puma has yet to produce a leather boot that's quite as good as these. I absolutely love the way that these feel in regards to giving you that soft, traditional leather sensation. Just a really simple, really comfortable design that, like I said, Puma was unable to replicate. The Puma King that came after this was just nowhere near as good. They tried to modernize it too much. They decreased the quality of the leather as well as the amount of leather, and it just wasn't the same. I love the classic styling of this particular shoe. It's got the big fold-over flap tongue with the Velcro, and honestly, fold-over flap tongues, something that really do bother me in regards to playing. I love the way they look, but I'd rather them not be there. I don't mind this one at all. It fits across the top of the foot, absolutely perfect, hides the laces, and it looks really cool as well. I love that they incorporated these little kind of rivets in the upper that are simply there for styling. I don't even think that they're true rivets. High quality kangaroo leather throughout the entire shoe, especially in the toe box forefoot area. I love the King embroidery and the Puma form stripe with the embroidery through that as well. The heel liner, really good quality synthetic suede. It's got a nice insole as well. And then the sole plate and stud pattern, again, it has that old school look to it, which I think is really cool. Even the two rivets at the toe for the sake of durability. These being very, very durable. It's flexible. It's a traditional stud pattern. It's just one of those shoes that has the modern build quality, but all the classic materials and design. Really like what they did with this model. They even did some SL variations of this shoe, which were also really cool. Super, super light, super thin leather. The only issue with those is that you missed out on the tongue, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but they weren't super durable. They overstretched really, really easily, which was not an issue with the original Puma King Finale. I really do hope that Puma brings back the Puma King series, because obviously they're going for something very modern these days in terms of their current lineup. But something like this, maybe not quite as traditional looking, but something of this particular quality definitely could do well in today's market if they are trying to bring something like this back. So I guess we'll see what happens. And that pretty much concludes this episode of 5 Random Boots. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to support it with a like. And if you did enjoy it so much that you don't want to miss the next episode, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below in the comments, and I'll do my best to get an answer out to you as soon as I possibly can. If you're not following me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of that is linked down below in the description, so be sure to go ahead and check that out. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.